Well, there certainly is a lot of attention being drawn to the anomalous warm waters surrounding the UK and the eastern and tropical Atlantic. Be interesting to see what happens as we go into the heart of summer. Thanks for clicking on to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. So these dark reds, these scary looking reds at 4 to 6 Celsius above average temperature wise. Of course, back in Sunday, I gave the reasons why I think that there is a potential reason why we've got these exceptionally warm waters in this region of the world at the moment. Here we have a few areas of anomalous warm water, the Sea of Japan being one of them, the North Pacific, the Eastern Equatorial Pacific, of course, with the developing El Nino, the tropical Atlantic, where we have got the potential of a hurricane developing as a system approaches the Eastern Caribbean Sea. I believe this is close to a record for the earliest long fetch African wave development on record. So that, of course, will draw a lot of attention also. But what does these dark reds actually correlate to in terms of actual sea surface temperature anomaly? Well, this is the sea surface temperatures around the UK and Ireland according to the Meteosea website. And you can see here we've got 12 to about 16, 17 Celsius, a couple of 18s showing up in the southwest corner of England, as you can see here. So yes, warmer than average, probably actually approaching what would typically be the warmest SSTs for any time of the year surrounding the UK and Ireland. But I suppose when you look at it this way, it doesn't just look quite as intimidating looking as what the anomaly chart is showing here. So I thought I would start the video by actually looking at that. We do have a warming trend, especially across the southeastern half of the country as we progress through this week. We're back in a more classic northwest to southeast split in terms of conditions. It looks as if the ECMWF, the GFS, and other models are now starting to show a little bit of a breakdown in the pattern, certainly in terms of heat, humidity, and indeed high pressure as we progress towards the start of July. We'll get to that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But the temperature certainly, as we progress towards Saturday, looks as if it's going to be pretty warm across the southeastern half of the country in particular, where we could see 30, 31, possibly an outside chance of a 32 Celsius by the time we reach Saturday. To the northwest of the UK, you can see quite a difference in terms of 22, 23 Celsius as opposed to the 30 or 31 across the southeast half of the country here. Looking at the GFS ensembles, by the way, this is the upcoming 5-day period. And you can see here that we do have quite a different regime overall. Now, we do still have that high over Northern and Central Europe, but the upper pattern is quite different to what we have seen so far. If we look back at the period really extending from the 1st of April all the way through to the 16th of June, this has been the mean upper level pattern. Strong area of high pressure across the top, negatives across the south, hence why we've seen a lot of rain across southern and central portions of Europe, and indeed near drought conditions across the northern half of the UK, in particular across parts of Ireland, as well as that across northern Europe, also parts of Scandinavia, the Baltic nations, Finland. We've seen exceptionally dry conditions. That being said, however, we're a little bit late in the game with regards to the first 30 Celsius of the year. So if you look back, and this is a couple of retweets that I did a little bit earlier on, and you can see here some interesting statistics. So Dan Harris from the Met Office showed that Manston, before we had an area of heavy, persistent, thundery rain that moved out of France, across the Channel, into central and southern England, that is now pressing up towards the northeast of England into the Borders region as I speak. That brought a fairly decent spell of rain during the day today, this morning in particular, and into the early portion of the afternoon. But there was 35 days without a drop of rain at Manston in the southeast from the 13th of May to the 16th of June before the streak finally ended. Now, how often do we see in media, once they start talking about drought and hosepipe bans, how often does the weather pattern all of a sudden flip around and the rains eventually come? I think, really realistically speaking, this very, very warm water surrounding the UK and Ireland here, if we start to see that much anticipated decrease in the pressure field further north into the month of July, as I expect to see, we could see a lot of fuel for areas of low pressure to tap, and we could see some very significant rainfall as we press into the month of July and even into the month of August. But thanks to this upper air pattern of low pressure underneath high pressure, we have seen very slow warming across the typical warm areas of Europe. There, of course, is that system now named Brett, crossing the central tropical Atlantic, the furthest east tropical storm to have formed in the Atlantic this early in the calendar year. So that's quite interesting. But we are starting to see the first 30s now appearing in areas you would expect to see 30s before now. So, in other words, we've got the first 30 just recently in Slovakia. We've also seen incredible warmth across Iceland. Bearing in mind that the all-time record is only just over 30.5 Celsius, recorded back all the way back to 1939. But it had 2 days of near 28 Celsius, which is pretty remarkable. Also quite impressive is the fact that the CET for the month of June so far is 22.7, tweet by Dr. Simon Lee. The current record for June as a whole is 22.5 from June 1976. That record appears under threat. Of course, we have had a bit of a decrease in temperature in the last 24 hours thanks to that area of rain moving north. Today was the first recorded 30 Celsius in the Czech Republic, and Austria seeing its latest first 30 since 1990, believe it or not. Also, the first 30 in Latvia. We've also seen the first 30 in Finland in the last 24 hours or so. And, the Baltic nations, the Balkan region, even Serbia, places that have seen tremendous amounts of rain over the last month versus the lack of rain across the north, of course, we are now starting to catch up in terms of temperature here. And of course, with low pressure moving up towards Iceland and Scotland, higher pressure starting to strengthen, we are going to start to see that classic heat building over Iberia, over central Mediterranean countries, up into the central portion of Europe, and that, of course, extends up into the dry regions of southern Scandinavia. If you haven't already done so, check out my first helicopter flight video. I did release that here on YouTube late last night, so if you haven't already done so, please check that out if you're interested. So like I say, we do have that change in the overall pattern. Quite a messy setup actually. We've got a deepening trough. We're starting to tap some fairly cold air out of Greenland. If we look at the 850s actually, we'll look at the GFS and we'll look at the ECMWF as a comparison. But you see here these 850s, there's that area of low pressure now centered between Iceland and Scotland. So we now start to have that strongest area of high pressure, the further south, lower pressure up towards Greenland, up towards Iceland. Fairly typical for this time of the year, of course. And the jet stream is developing a little bit more vigor as well. As that cold air sinks out of Greenland, we are seeing, of course, that it's meeting that warm subtropical air over the subtropical and tropical Atlantic. You collide the two, you increase the strength of the jet stream, and we are now starting to see that bit of a kick in the atmosphere. So you can see the cold air getting cycled out of Greenland around these areas of low pressure. Up comes the heat into the central portion of the continent, as you can see here. The UK is going to get in there as well. These areas of low pressure stay far enough to the west that it has that open door to some heat from Spain, Portugal, lifting up into the British Isles. We are going to see low 20s all the way up to the north of Scotland, but possibly low 30s as we progress towards Saturday in particular. So, some fairly warm air actually getting lifted north along with humidity as we progress towards the upcoming weekend here. But then it's as we push through the weekend, you notice that areas of low pressure then move west to east and kind of cuts off that heat, trying to lift up from the south here. And then it looks as if we have got a very interesting setup here as we end the month of June, begin the month of July here. Look at this area of low pressure now starting to become a little bit more dominant over UK and Ireland airspace, as you can see here, to end the month of June, begin the month of July. And yeah, isn't that rather interesting? And of course, when you look at the amount of warm water surrounding the UK and Ireland, do we see an increase in some very heavy precip? I think there's a lot of fuel there to tap, and I think it could get rather interesting as we go forward here. So you can see here, if we look back at the overview chart here, go back to the current setup here. Of course, we've got these areas of low pressure, rotating these areas of rainfall, steady rain, heavy precipitation, and shower activity. In sunshine, with the instability within the atmosphere, you develop showers and thunderstorms. That is going to be an ongoing occurrence through the middle and second half of this week. Then things settle down a little bit. We've got an area of higher pressure that kind of builds in over the British Isles through the second half of this week. Keeping an eye on that feature there over northern France. We could see some very problematic weather, some very significant thunderstorm activity across northern France into the Low Countries here. All the while, that area of high pressure then lifts north. We're increasing the strength of the jet stream here. Areas of low pressure quite far to the south over the Atlantic, as you can see here. But of course, this strengthening of jet stream winds then forces air to the east then to get lifted northwards up into the UK. Hence why we could see 30, 31 Celsius across particularly the southeastern half of the country here. But a glancing blow here, as you can see, for western areas of the UK and Ireland as we go through the upcoming weekend. But it's as we then see that system move out, into the North Sea, into the near continent. Look at this next area of low pressure. Notice the change. Notice the upper air pattern starting to change around. We're starting to draw down those heights and increase the chance of lower pressure. Now we've not seen a 979 millibar low anywhere near our shores for a very long time. So that's quite a different overall look to the pattern, isn't it? Quite a different, messy looking picture as well. All the while we've got plenty of heat and humidity across central portions of Europe here. But the GFS has these heights continuing to come down, and then it looks as if it tries to send areas of low pressure across the UK, bringing a much cooler overall pattern, as well as much more unsettled, some fairly heavy rain associated with this type of setup as well here. Let's look at the ECMWF. Is it just the GFS is showing it? Is it a one-off? Well, if we look at the ECMWF, you can see here that area of rain, quite a widespread rain moving up through England, parts of Wales, into the southeast of Scotland. Further north and west, of course, we had the showers and thunderstorms. They'll continue through the next several hours this evening. And then, of course, as we press towards the second half of this week, there's that trough, digging a little bit further south. We're energizing the jet over the Atlantic here. We're going to then force that heat out of the south to lift up over the UK as we press towards the upcoming weekend. And then, of course, we'll start to see the trough becoming deeper in the upper levels as well as the low levels across the North Atlantic. And that then bodily shifts in towards the UK, like what the GFS is showing. So that is very interesting. And then we notice here that we've got much fresher winds coming in off the Atlantic as opposed to the south or southwest. So it looks as if the models are starting to really kind of take that turn towards a much more fresher start to the month of July. And will that maintain itself, or is it just a blip in an overall warmer, drier theme? That, of course, remains very much to be seen. Looking back at the GFS ensemble here, this is the upcoming 5 days. You notice here that high tries to back west and means, but look at this here. Look at the trough coming down over the British Isles towards the period week 1 of July here. So it's all to play for. Keep it right here, my YouTube channel. I do appreciate each and every view, each and every new subscription. It's very, very much appreciated. So please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. and I shall hopefully see you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.